morning. I am Lorraine Bautista Orok, a BS Fisheries student 3A. And for today's discussion, I will discuss the topics about food web and food pyramid, the trophic levels. To start with, I will going to screen share the presentation that I made for these topics. Food web and food pyramid. What is food web? Food web is described as who eats whom in an ecological community or the ecosystem. It is an interconnected food chains that link together to show feeding relationships of organisms in an ecosystem. Food web differ from food chain is food chain follows one path of energy and materials between species, while food web is the group of food chains that shows the relationships between organisms in an ecosystem in terms of feeding. Food web are important in understanding that plants are the foundation of all ecosystems, sustaining life by providing nourishment, oxygen needed for survival and reproduction. Food web explains that the main producers or the main source of food are the plants. And in food web, it shows that the consumers eat their food for able to them to survive. And also it explains the importance of oxygen because it is needed for survival and reproduction. This is an example of food web in a ocean. Once the plants capture the energy from sun through photosynthesis, it passes around through the organisms in an area. The transfer of energy occur or took place when one organism eats one organisms, the primary, secondary, or the tertiary consumers. Trophic level is the basic structure of interaction in all biological communities characterized by the manner in which food energy is passed from one trophic level to the next along the food chain. Trophic level categorize each organisms depending on feeding habitat and food source that they eat. And there are four levels in it. The first is the primary producers. Primary producers includes plants, algae, and etc. It is the base level of the aquatic food web. They synthesize their energy without needing them to eat. And the second level is the primary consumers. Primary consumers eat the primary producers. They are herbivores. They are in small size. Then the next is the secondary consumers. Secondary consumers eat the primary consumers. They are carnivorous animals that are also eaten by carnivores. Example of this is butterfly fish or the coral guard. Next is the tertiary consumers, the apex predators or the top predators. Carnivorous that are organisms that are not prey upon them. Example of this is sharks, tuna, and seals. To sum it up, food web is a group of food chain that represents or shows the relationships between organisms and the ecosystems in terms of feeding, while the food chain follows one path of energy and materials between species or organisms in the environment. Next is it is important to understand that plants is the foundation of ecosystem and in food chain or food web explains the importance of oxygen for survival and reproduction and also food web demonstrate how the energy transferred to one organism to another organism. When the plant capture the sun energy due to photosynthesis, it directly passes throughout the organisms within the area. It started with
the primary consumers, secondary consumers, and the last is the tertiary consumers. In the trophic levels, there are four types. First is the base of the aquatic food web, the primary producers, which includes plants, algae, and etc. In this level, they don't need food to synthesize their own energy. While in the second level is the primary consumers, they eat the primary producers, the algae, because they are herbivores. They only eat plants or algae. Then next is the secondary consumers. In this level, there are carnivores that eats in the primary primary consumers, the second level on trophic. Then the next is the top predators or the tertiary consumers. This includes sharks, tuna. They are carnivores that preyed upon them. So, in that trophic pyramid or trophic levels, it explains the different types of feeding habitat and food source that they need for able to them to survive and to reproduce. That's all. Thank you.